Welcome. What's up, witches, and welcome back to Geeky Ghouls. We're your hosts. I'm Cheyenne.
Bree.
And Claudia.
Thank you for your support and feedback. We've decided to release new episodes every other Tuesday. As always, if you have any topics you'd like us to cover in an episode, we'd love to hear them. Drop them in the comments or message us on social media. But before we get into today's topic, how's your week been, guys?
It's good.
Gals?
We just saw Heretic, and so it's living rent-free in my head currently.
Uh, it lived rent free for maybe the day for me, and then I was like, eh.
There's so much I want to dive into, but we will, wait till everybody sees it and we'll chat about it some more perhaps, or maybe we'll do a video essay. I don't know, but it's just in my brain.
I haven't decided if I'm going to see it yet or not. Like I said, I went to a Christian school for many years, and I have a lot of religious trauma. And the thought of watching something religious like that that has to do with religion kind of gives me anxiety. But I mean, most things do, so that doesn't say much.
I get it in the sense that if it was a home invasion movie, I would not have watched it.
I
but
hate those so much. Those are
Me too.
that is horrifying to me. That is the worst genre for me. It's home invasions.
But in a lot of ways, this was the opposite.
Yeah, most things are the opposite for me. I'm like, that's not too scary, like ghosts and all that. But when it's home invasion, I'm like, no, it's too real.
It's too real.
Don't invade my personal space.
There's also this idea, I would never knock on a stranger's door and then invite myself in. So, I'm not worried about that. Therefore, I signed up to watch the movie. But
yeah. So we are now recording this post-election, and we did get together literally day after and had a blast, I think. Not to celebrate the election, more like, how would you explain?
Just celebrating, hanging out.
Yeah.
I would say we looked for a sense of normalcy when everyone was going through their feels. I don't know.
Yeah.
Girl, I think that's part of why that damn movie lives so rent-free in my head, because ultimately, spoiler alert, if you're gonna listen to this, fast forward 5 minutes so you don't listen to Heretic. But essentially, they're talking about how belief systems are the ultimate belief system being control. People can use control over people, but when you're watching the climatic scene of this fake prophet, which is a woman who's been just horribly disfigured from being in a cage and having misters on all the time and wearing this very eerie gown over their face and their body. When you don't really know what's happening, you just know you're introduced to this thing that supposedly comes back to life. But at some moment, the girls that are trying to escape are off doing their own thing, and if the camera focuses in on the woman recontorting her body to almost not exist in a space. And so later you see that she's been in a cage the whole time. And so the whole premise that I got out of it and the reason why it's haunting me isn't the big scary guy that's creating this experiment, but the most haunting aspect being how the stories we tell ourselves in trying to deal with whatever's happening, we get comfortable with this story to be okay, to have some kind of control and sense of our own lives. And that's what makes it haunting. Not just the people that hold power over you, but how that narrative shifts and changes within ourselves. And that's what brings us back to the election, right? This idea that it's not just the people that are trying to control or get rid of environmental safety nets or other things that we're all worried about, but there's also this idea that how we respond and the narrative we tell ourselves also can put them in more control or less depending on the story we tell ourselves. And so yeah, don't lose hope, and continue to pursue on. And I think that's kind of where That sits with me.
Yeah. No, that's a good explanation. The whole election day after recording with you guys, I was so anxious the entire time. And like what I do is I stress sleep. So I went to bed and woke up and saw the results and kind of had a very much felt doom and gloom. But me and my husband were in Orange County at the time, and I then was texting everybody like, I'm in the area, the day sucked. Why don't we get together and try and find normalcy? And that's when we got together. We had the best hamburgers. My husband keeps talking about them.
I'll let my husband know that you approve the hamburgers. For those of you listening, Cheyenne's husband is a chef. He cooks in a kitchen, and
He's very picky.
is picky because of it. And suggesting burgers was kind of like a really burgers. My husband's like, it's gonna change his life, trust me. So yeah, there we go. Glad to hear the burgers were delicious.
Yes. He did a big thing for him. He said he would definitely go back there, which he doesn't say about a lot of things. But it was nice to get together and have that normalcy. And then also, it wasn't about the podcast, because I feel like every time I see you guys, even though it's over the internet or I talk to you guys, it's all about the podcast. So it was nice to have that. But now we're back to work, and we're going to get these episodes out every other Tuesday, just because scheduling is a bitch.
Yeah, it was fun. So yeah, burgers, karaoke, some amazing singing.
A lot of alcohol had by me and Brie.
Yeah, but I would think I was the only one that got 100.
Girl, you
Oh
were
my
so
girl,
lit.
girl.
What song was that? I don't even remember what song it was.
So since Brie gets hundreds on her karaoke, we will at some point have her sing for all of you.
I think it's because karaoke isn't about how good you sound, it's how precise you know the words, and I don't remember what song it was.
Well, you and your boyfriend,
Doesn't
you
matter.
both did a Kiss. I Was Made for Loving You.
Oh, was it that one?
Adorable. And
it might have been that one.
It was so
yeah,
gross.
I know
It
that
was
song
great.
so well.
It was so disgustingly sweet. I hated every second of it. It was cute.
It was fun.
I was like, look at them being all cute over there.
Ugh, disgusting.
Disgusting.
It was like wearing matching shirts on tandem bikes. Gross.
Yeah. Giving me cavities.
Yeah.
Anyways, so on today's episode, we are following up on a listener's request for more cursed objects. So, Felicia, this one's for you. Today, we are talking about a cursed object that's been rumored about since the Victorian era. It's called the Unlucky Mummy, or Amun Ra, the Priestess, Mummy Board. This object has a bunch of different names. Now, let's not get this confused with the millennial bisexual awakening film, The Mummy, of 1999. Just a chef's kiss to the casting directors, Roz and John Hubbard.
And if you're going blank on what film that is with the Brendan Fraser and the beautiful librarian or archaeologist. What is her name? Oh my gosh.
I just know her nickname is Evie.
Because in the movie, her name is Evelyn.
Okay, yeah.
In the movie, her name is Evelyn, but the actress name is Rachel Weisz.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Still gorgeous.
Absolutely gorgeous.
I mean, the whole cast is beautiful.
Truly.
No wonder I was so obsessed with it as growing up.
One last pivot before we come back to the actual plot of this episode. Do you consider The Mummy a horror film?
In 1999,
maybe.
Exactly. In 1999, when I was about 8 years old, yes, it was a horror film. Now in my 30s, I'm just like, look at all these beautiful people, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, now it's more of like a little action film because it's
Yeah.
not
Right.
scary anymore due to the fact that the visual effects are not as good
Right?
as.
Okay, so like personally, I put the Mummy in the same box as Indiana Jones, like adventure action
I'm
film.
pretty sure that's what they were going for with
That's what I
that
thought they were
movie.
going for. And so when someone else recently mentioned it and said it was a horror film, not with YouTube, but someone else, and my brain was like, I don't see it, but I got to ask more questions because I never thought of it that way. So yeah, that
No,
makes
I feel
sense.
like it's more
Visual
of like a
effects.
comfort film for me. I could watch it anytime
Yep,
and not feel that at all.
me
Hmm.
too.
So I grew up
like
watching this.
like I said, at 8 years old, yes, I was terrified of the Mummy, but also I kept watching it because to me, I was like, these are all beautiful people, and
Absolutely.
the
I think
rest is
I've seen.
history.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that movie as many times as I've seen Grease, which is a lot.
Yeah, me too. I was like,
Yeah.
I've seen this movie a lot.
Also has
One
beautiful
and
people
two,
in it.
though.
So, getting into the unlucky mummy. Um, so, if you have ever found yourself enthralled in the Egyptian section of the London British Museum, you might lock eyes with beautiful but unusual mummy board. Now, a mummy board is a wooden cover placed over the body. It's carved and painted to represent the deceased as if they were alive and dressed in a long white pleated gown. The mummy board in question is a wooden coffin displaying a woman's face embellished with winged gods and hieroglyphs whose colors remain bright even now, nearly 3,000 years later. You may feel compelled to stare at this object, but after a while, even if you don't want to take your eyes away, you begin to experience a troubling sense of dread and interest that grows more and more sinister as you look. Now, if that were to happen, you would not be the first to experience this. Artifact number 22542 is currently on exhibit in the Museum Room 62 at the heart of London's Folklore Room. This cursed artifact, known as the Unlucky Mummy, has been said to have caused death, illness, injuries, even bankruptcy, leaving a deep sorrow in anyone who comes into contact with it. It's been reported to have shattered glass, distorted images, caused unusual flickering lights, and unsettling footsteps in the structures it's been housed in. So, what does it look like? Essentially, it's a wooden board covered in plaster, kind of like a canvas, but it's not just a painting. The details are sculptured right into the plaster, raised up, kind of like a 3D decoration. The designs are delicate, intricate, painted in reds, blues, greens, and the whole thing has this cool aged yellow tinted look, probably from a varnish that's been aging over time. Now, the real fun is the symbols on the mummy board itself. It has a large, colorful collar, and below that, a world of Egyptian gods and symbols such as bamboos worshiping the sun, uh, Os- Osiris watching over, and even Amenhotep the First, King of Thebes. Uh, it's kind of like a mini universe with everything the deceased would need to have a smooth journey into the afterlife. Just pretty cool, right?
That is pretty cool. I could see why people wanted to collect them as art displays in their homes at one point.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was like a whole Egyptian craze at the time when pyramids were being unlocked or opened up for the first time.
Which is crazy now if you think about it. When people find stuff, they're like, don't open it. But back then, they're like just opening them left and right.
Right.
Not only were they just opening them, they'd have like unboxing parties. The Victorians,
They were
and
just
That's
they
crazy.
pillaging these places, so let's be
yes,
real.
and they would like use the bodies for medicine because they thought like these bodies are so well preserved, so we need whatever they have.
It's such a weird.
Like
so gross.
consuming cannibalistic rituals
Yeah.
for medicine. I don't know about that. I'm like saying it out loud, like, no,
The
thank you. No.
Victorians were crazy. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, the Victorians snorted cocaine for a cold, right? Like,
Yeah, I feel like that would work though.
I mean, you definitely feel good. I don't know if it cure your cold, but
do some heroin for it. Yep.
just some vapors. Calm the hysteria.
All right. Now let's get into like where this mummy even came from.
Yeah,
The story is kind of
museum?
crazy. So how did it find its way to the British Museum? A number of similar but distinct accounts describe how the unlucky mummy was discovered, transported to England, and eventually exhibited in the British Museum. In the 1860s, Oxford graduates traveled to Egypt and sailed down the Nile, which had been a long and popular tourist destination at the time, Cairo. They purchased a souvenir from the mummy pits at Deir el Bahari, the mummy board. The man who led the trip was Thomas Douglas Murray, who was a wealthy Oxford graduate. Murray identified the coffin's hieroglyphics, and it showed a woman that could have been a high priestess of Amun Ra. All the Englishmen immediately wanted to buy this object. They saw it, they presented it to them, and they drew straws, basically, for who would be able to buy it. The winner, of course, being Murray, uh, bought the board, and he had it packed and shipped back to England that same evening. After a few days, the Englishmen then traveled up the Nile to enjoy some quail shooting. But Murray's firearm unexpectedly exploded, wounding his right arm. He rushed back to Cairo to seek some medical assistance, but his journey was hindered by unusual strong headwinds. What should have been an average journey took 10 days, and by this time Murray arrived in Cairo. Gangrene had infiltrated the wound. To prevent the disease from spreading, his arm had to be amputated. Murray had recovered somewhat, so the three agreed to return to England after. Before they left, they heard some unsettling rumors about the man who discovered Murray's mummy board. They heard that the man perished after touching the bandages of the mummy itself and wandered off into the desert in a trance, never to be seen again. And the rumors also spread that the two servants who have handled the mummy board were being kind of disrespectful towards it, ended up both dying within a year. And the fate took the third one, who cracked a joke about the mummy board, and he met his end very quickly. Now things start to get a little even more strange. On the voyage back to Britain, two of Murray's friends died and were buried at sea. On reaching his London house, another member of his group, Arthur Wheeler, who managed to make it back to England too, lost his entire fortune gambling and then moved to America, where he gained a new fortune and lost it again, both to flood and fire. Feeling far from well himself, back in his hall of his London home, Murray found the mummy board unpacked, and it was waiting for him in the hallway. Rather than being struck by its beautiful craftsmanship that he had been so bewitched in Cairo, it was now filled his home with uneasiness and dread. Murray, being interested in spiritualism, called upon a Russian clairvoyant and founder of the Theosophy movement, Madame Blavatsky. Is that how you say her name? Blavatsky? Blavatsky.
Sure.
Blavatsky.
Blavatsky.
Blavatsky?
Is my pronunciation.
I'm curious, what is the Theosophy movement? Just like theology, or?
Yeah, so that's like when they were all starting to get interested in spiritualism.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So that's when, the spiritualism was making its way all over Europe, especially England, where the rich and people who had money would gather around and they would discuss ghost stories. They usually called them like ghost parties.
Okay.
Well, as the clairvoyant gazed upon the board, Murray asked if it could be exorcised. She said, "There is no such thing as an exorcism. Evil remains forever. Nothing can be done about it. I implore you to get rid of this evil as soon as possible."
Oh, excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah. She
Could you
said no.
imagine? No, this evil is yours. I can never take it back. Jesus, that's
Yes.
terrible. No, thank you.
Well, Murray, relieved when a journalist came around asking if he could write or she could write an article about him and the mummy board. They asked to borrow the mummy board. Soon after, the unlucky mummy entered her house. Her mother tumbled down the stairs and died.
Oh my god.
Yep. The journalist's fiance broke off their engagement, and her prized dogs went mad and became violently ill. She immediately sent the board back to Murray. Rattled, he entrusted it to his other friend who survived the journey, Mr. Wheeler, he wanted to buy the mummy board back in Cairo too, but of course soon after he received the mummy board, he died brokenhearted. But before he died, he entrusted the mummy board to his sister who also lived in London. And from the moment it entered her home, this lady became consumed by worries and sorrows. She was still so fascinated by it, though, that she took it to a Baker Street studio to be photographed. She was horrified to learn that after the plate was developed and even through the negative had not been changed in any way, yet there showed a glowering hatred look with furious eyes of a living Egyptian woman.
Whoa. Photoshop before
So,
Photoshop.
So at this point, they're just passing it around.
so do we think this is how they got stories like the 1999 film The Mummy?
Oh, yeah,
With
definitely.
yeah,
Anytime there's anything you don't know a lot about, you're going to want to make stories about it. And you're just going to mix all sorts of silly things together.
but also it's almost like maybe you shouldn't disturb the resting place of people who are long dead.
Yeah, absolutely. Leave things alone. There's a reason no one else is trying to get in there. Also, nobody asked you to come in here because, like, all the people that were like going in and taking things out weren't even from there.
Yeah, for this instance, it's interesting that it's just the plate, the cas. It's basically they're usually caskets that they open. This is just the front part. The mummy has long been already dispatched in Cairo. They have no idea what happened to the mummy. So this is just the front part of the casket.
Well,
So
still like
it tells you like how
Did I
careless they
lose
were
you
with
too?
these
Okay,
caskets when they
froze.
opened them back then. Because it was more
mhm.
of a novelty thing, like, ooh, let's sell this part and this part separately and this part. And
Yeah,
it
it's almost as if
was,
all these white people saw all these brown people's culture and treated it like a sideshow.
well, yeah, it was more like of a novelty thing. Like it was so different from European culture that they wanted to bring it back and
My
share it
internet
with
cut out, so
everybody
I
to
don't
be
know
like,
the.
Well,
In the course of a few weeks, the photographer died suddenly and in mysterious circumstances. It was said that later, the owner of one of the photographs, when they brought it into their home, every piece of glass in his house shattered, which is scary to think about.
So, like, all
It,
the windows, all the. Oh,
I assume so. It's
okay.
glass. All of your fine china gone.
Hmm.
The next time Wheeler's sister met Murray, she told him about the horrible sequence of events. Emery then finally realized it was unfair to keep troubling his acquaintances with the mummy board and had suggested donating the mummy board to the British Museum. An Egyptologist who organized the transfer of the board had the case sent to his house so he could study the hieroglyphics. He died shortly after. his servant saying his master hadn't slept a day since the coffin was brought to the house. And apparently, the carrier who brought the mummy to the house had also died within a week. And then another photographer who had taken an image of the woman later then shot himself. Its arrival at the British Museum in 1889. It arrived at the British Museum in 1889 and was presented to Sir Ernest Wallace Budge. Was the keeper of the Egyptian and Assyrian antiquities. It became a well-known rumor that anyone who had tried to photograph, sketch, or touched the mummy board would be struck down. Now imagine you accidentally brush up against that thing.
I just heard the recap. Death, more death to the person that's just carrying it because he was getting paid to do so.
It's the curse. What's that one line in The Mummy where he's like, the curse, and he like runs out all crazy?
Yes.
I just think of that.
Yeah. That's what they're making it sound like. Yeah.
I like how in the beginning we're like, this is not The Mummy, but let's also just compare it to the movie The Mummy from 1999. Not the horrible Tom Cruise remake.
Oh gosh, no.
No, never that.
No. Always Brendan Fraser.
We're just gonna pretend we didn't.
We're gonna pretend it doesn't exist. Anyways, Wallace Budge was reportedly so concerned with the number of stories he had heard, and when the mummy board was placed in the museum, numerous staff reported unexplained hammering noises and sobs coming from the case. He then began to wonder if the priestess was unhappy with her position and presentation in the museum. I mean, she was at rest, and then they brought her out. Like, come on.
Well, she doesn't even know where her body's at, so.
I know.
It's very unsettling.
I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about about putting a woman on display, even in her death, by men. He had arranged for the mummy board to be installed in a display case of its own, adorned with a flattering description. The disturbances were reported to have decreased after this, although night cleaning personnel continued to report ghostly sightings and overwhelming feelings of terror coming from the case. I'm starting to think that Night at the Museum is based off of this. In 1889, Murray was part of a large movement of people becoming interested in the paranormal. At the time when seances and communicating with the other side were all the rage, but like many of spiritualists at the time, his desire to find the existence of an afterlife came at the expense of the truth. Murray came across the story of an English woman who acquired an Egyptian mummy and displayed it in her drawing room. The morning after she installed it, she entered the room to find everything smashed. She moved the mummy to another room, only to have the room contents smashed too. The mummy was then moved to the attic, but this didn't halt any paranormal shenanigans. That night, footsteps tramped up and down the stairs, accompanied by an eerie flickering of lights. The following morning, all the lady's servants had quit. I mean, me too. No, thank you. I'm good.
When in doubt, just get out.
Yep. It's almost like these spirits are pissed off that they're not in their resting place.
Right?
It's almost like we should leave bodies alone. Whatever the truth, Murray, excited by the tale he'd heard and knowing Amun-Ra priestesses had recently been gifted to the British Museum, he went to examine or re-examine the mummy board. He was accompanied by his friend, the famous, some would say notorious journalist W.T. Stead. Of course, standing for the William Thomas Stead, born 1849, died at 1912, was one of the first investigative journalists whose style foreshadowed much of the shock, outrage, and hyperbole that would characterize 20th century tabloid style reporting. He was also one of the earliest media figures to recognize that journalism could sway a public opinion.
So the beginning of fake news. Got it.
Alternative facts.
There you go.
Bring that little nugget back.
Continue. Ignore me.
The two men, both of whom had a deep interest in spiritualism, felt the face painted on Amun-Ra's coffin had an extremely sad look, going so far as to say that the expression on the face of the cover looked of that of a living soul in torment. This prompted Murray to contact Sir Ernest Wallace Budge, the museum's keeper of Egyptian and Assyrian antiquities, to ask if he and Steed could hold a seance in the Egyptian section to attempt to contact the unlucky mummy spirit. Sir Ernest Wallace Budge denied Murray and Steed's request, but that did not stop stories of their attempt from being published. It did not stop the stories of their attempt from being published. Steed gave the whole story credence due to his previous work while being a Nobel Prize winner. The first appearance of the story of Murray and Steed's failed attempt to have a seance in the museum was written by Steed himself, and other excited writers quickly picked up the story, each likely adding more overblown details in the hopes of selling newspapers. Their articles combined the troubled soul of Amun-Ra's mummy with the remnants of the Victorian drawing room mummy, as well as the concept of the failed seance, hauntings, and other ancient Egyptian cursed traditions. It was well received by the public, and the myth of the unlucky mummy quickly spread far and wide.
I mean, I would also want to write fan fiction about creating a seance inside of a museum.
Isn't that what that is?
Oh wait,
exactly what it is.
I'm sorry, I'm summarizing in my own words. That's like, I mean, what a great setup.
Steed was like, Steed was like, and Steed and Murray tried to have a seance, and Steed being so handsome and dashing, and because he's the first one that wrote it about it, so he's probably like, he's the best. He's so, look at his rippling abs.
Oh my god,
never lies.
Okay,
ever.
I feel like I said fan fiction, but you went straight to, oh my gosh, what is it called? AO3.
I don't know what kind of fan fiction you read. I read a lot of interesting fan fiction. Some lemons.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, the premise, like, going back to, just for a moment here, this idea that you're having hosting or having a seance in a museum. Like, there's so many things that could go wrong. There's so many different themes you could pull from. Honestly, like, I kind of want to go read some of these stories.
I'm very interested if you had a seance in especially the British History Museum, like, what kind of shit would you conjure with all their artifacts, stolen artifacts?
Yeah. I mean, they have the biggest collection of stolen artifacts for sure. People from all over the world would come out of or I guess ghosts from all over the world.
Could be a bit of both. Anyways, fan fiction aside, we might wonder why Steed and Murray decided to generate such false stories, but both men were in their 40s, well established, and not in desperate need of funds. It seems that their profound spiritualist beliefs led them to make their claims about Amun-Ra's curse. They may have hoped an overblown story would capture the attention of those skeptical about the paranormal and lead them to an interest in the spiritual practices. They were successful because the story went worldwide and was continuously retold, as we are doing now. Murray, the man who started all the trouble with his rash purchase of the unlucky mummy in Cairo, well, his problems never ceased after the British Museum accepted Amun-Ra. As the years passed, Murray's fortune whittled away, and he died bankrupt and in poverty in 1912.
Dang.
What else happened in 1912? Something big happened in 1912.
Titanic?
Oh, I'm about to tell you what happened in 1912. But
Ooh, you tell us.
I think that Steed would probably tell it better from his perspective.
It's
what
been
he
84
thinks
years.
I'm sure James Cameron did quite the job on that one.
So now let's get into some of the wildest claims about the unlucky mummy's curse. So did the unlucky mummy sink the Titanic?
Yes, not an iceberg.
Mystery solved. All that evidence.
Somebody took a picture of it, didn't they?
Well, I'm about to tell you. In 1912, Steed added further dimension to this tale because he was one of the victims on board the Titanic. Steed's death
Damn
led...
Steed. Sorry.
I know, Steed! No. His death led to the resurgence of the rumors about the mummy board when one of the survivors told the story he heard from Steed on board the ship. One of the most interesting claims about the unlucky mummy was that it was responsible for sinking the Titanic. Apparently, the British Museum had reached the point to where they could no longer tolerate all the spooky shenanigans around the mummy and the mummy board continually injuring, picking off his staff. So the decision was made to try to offload the mummy and ship it to America. Yeah. Her new owner packed her up, booked a passage for himself, and got on board to the Titanic, where it would supposedly end up in New York. Now let's talk about Titanic, which was one of the most luxurious liners ever built during that time, especially. It was in fact known that it hit an iceberg, and then it went down in the early hours of the 15th of April of 1912. The tragedy resulted in 1,517 deaths, mainly due to the inefficient lifeboats and the confusion and disorganized evacuation process. So was this the end of Amun-Ra? Did she sink to the bottom of the ocean with the Titanic? Apparently not. According to some versions of this story, during the chaotic scramble for the lifeboats, amidst the cries of women and children first, the collector paid a bribe to somebody and got him and himself and the mummy board stowed on one of the life crafts. After bobbing on the nighttime waves, Amun-Ra, along with the surviving passengers, was rescued by a ship and made their journey to New York. However, other rumors say the unlucky mummy quickly caused misfortunes and sadness at its American owner's new home, causing him to return her back to Britain. For the same reason, this was done via Canada on the Empress of Ireland liner. On May 29, 1914, shortly after leaving Quebec City, the Empress collided with a Norwegian coal ship on the St. Lawrence River. The Empress sank so quickly that only 7 of her 40 lifeboats could be launched, and 840 passengers died with the ship. Can we talk about how interesting this would be if this was if the unlucky mummy made it onto the Titanic and onto the Empress?
I was going to say, I think it's kind of iconic. She's just sinking everybody's ship, somehow getting saved, continuing on the curse.
Yeah, she's tired of being put on display. She wants to go back to bed, and everybody's interrupting her beauty sleep. So therefore, they must all die.
Yeah, like she's like, I'm gonna take you down with me, but every time, like, people just keep interrupting and not letting her rest, right?
I know those motherfuckers.
Continuous sinking storyline.
So rude.
It's such an interesting rumor. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, the truth is actually far less elaborate, since the mummy board never moved from display from the museum since 1890. So how did this outlandish, like, fairy tale even start?
The Steed fanfic.
The Steed fanfiction.
Yes, the fanfic.
He was definitely to blame. Steed did travel on the Titanic, and he was heading to the States because President Taft had invited him to address a peace conference at New York's Carnegie Hall. Steed couldn't resist entertaining the other passengers with the tale of the unlucky mummy. It appears that over time, reports of Steed's presence aboard the Titanic and the story he told developed into the idea that Amun-Ra herself had traveled on the ship. From there on, it would be a short logical step to conclude that such a well-known cursed object had caused the ship to sink. The journalist that debunked the notion of that the unlucky mummy was on the Titanic was Bertrand Fletcher Robertson. Robertson began his investigation with the intention of just debunking the overblown stories that have grown around Amun-Ra. But the more he investigated, the more he became convinced that the curse maybe could be real. He wrote in one of his articles, "It is certain that the Egyptians had powers which we in the 20th century may laugh at, yet we can never understand."
Dang. I'm still on. Sorry, I've been having so much fun making fun of Steed and the fan fiction thing that I didn't realize he was somebody that like the president knew at the time, wanted to come speak at Carnegie Hall. So there was a moment where my brain's like, "Wait, quick recap. He's a journalist, or who is this man besides a
Yeah,
collector?
he's
Obviously
a
wealthy
journalist.
journalist. So
He's a
wealthy
well-known
journalist.
journalist.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
He's a journalist. And not popcorn. Bree, you said Carnage Hall, which made me laugh a bit. It's Carnegie.
Carnegie, it's just my
But
Carnage
the carnage at Carnegie,
Hall.
let me tell you.
it might have well been Carnage Hall.
But yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes I get distracted with the overall story and I just double checking. Who is this guy? What did he do? How did he get here? Got it. Okay, go on.
hmm
While Robinson looked deeper into the secrets in Amun-Ra for an article for Pearson's, his friends became aware of the disasters that had befallen those who dared meddle with the mummy, voicing their concerns for him. One of them being a famous writer of the Sherlock Holmes novels, Arthur Conan Doyle, said this to Robinson. "I warned Mr. Robinson against concerning himself with the mummy at the British Museum. He persisted."
Damn, they got the author of Sherlock telling you not to do that.
I want to say it's Doyle who was very against the Enlightenment movement because I believe it's him that made a mission to like disprove. But I could be just mixing him up with somebody else. But I know I've heard him a lot, especially when it comes to like paranormal stuff. I'm just gonna look it up real quick, so I'm not like.
I mean, even without looking it up, I can see that a lot of what he writes about it has these stories of the mystics, but then it's revealed in a Scooby Doo fashion, right? That it's somebody else all along. It's never
Like
actually
uncovering like the paranormal to be something normal.
Yes,
Like
I think that's a theme
taking
that
its mask
recurs.
off.
So I can see that.
Well, however, in January 1907, before he could finish his article, Robinson died at the age of just 36. But much of his research ended up being published. Doyle gave his ideas about Robinson's death to the public, saying, "I told him he was tempting fate by pursuing his inquiries. The immediate cause of death was typhoid fever. But
Typhoid.
Typhoid.
the immediate cause of death was typhoid fever. But that is the way in which the elements, nature's spirits guarding the mummy, might act." The Pearson's article might be the source of the resurgence, or at least be responsible for amplifying much of the mythological, like superstitious around the unlucky mummy. It is also possible that the owner of Pearson's magazine took advantage of Robinson's untimely death and resurrected the old mummy myth to sell copies of his publication, throwing in quotes from the famous Arthur Conan Doyle.
More publicity stunts.
Between Steed and Doyle,
Mm-hmm.
the story definitely did get around with their names thrown in.
Yeah. And I think it adds credibility. Going back to, as much as we're making fun of the fanfic, Steve being a journalist would mean that he's going to be respected and like trusted as an authority on any subject matter,
Yeah,
or
I think that's why
most.
people took the story like as truth because they're like Steed saying it, it must be true.
Or it's connected to Steed. It must be true. Yeah, I can see that.
Are you still researching, Shan?
I don't know, but I want Cheyenne to tell me more about the London's Underground Station.
I will. I have to fact check myself because I'm gonna go crazy. Um, who is that magician?
Houdini?
Houdini.
So I want to say it's Houdini and Conan Doyle. They were like they butt heads a lot. One was like really into paranormal stuff, and the other one was like staunchly against it. Okay, so I did mix them up. Sir Conan Doyle was a believer. Harry Houdini was against it.
That makes sense because like Houdini specialized in magic tricks that were real, but
Yes,
it was
and
just
so
like
he
twisting your
he
perception
caught
of
on
it.
to these fake seances that people would have. Um, so and it was also had to do a lot with them taking advantage of these people who are grieving a lost family member because this happened after the Civil War. So a lot of people lost like tons of family, tons of loved ones. So they really gravitated towards seances and things like that. Um, and so a lot of people caught on to that, and so there was a lot of fakes.
Also, I'm enjoying this because I didn't really realize that Harry Houdini and Sir Arthur uh, Conan Doyle were friends, and kind of puts in perspective. 'Cause sometimes people kind of exist separately in our
You
heads as
yeah,
we
you
read them and learn
forget
about them,
because
right?
you're like Sherlock, magician, like you're not thinking of them.
Connecting. Hmm.
You're not even thinking about them existing at the same
At the same
time.
time, much less knowing each other.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Anyways, now that I've fact checked myself, I can now go on with the story.
Oh, perfect. Now tell us about London's Underground Station.
Yeah. An additional bizarre story regarding the unlucky mummy says she haunted a London underground station. British Museum Station, a now closed metro stop that served the institution, was said to have a secret passageway connecting it to the museum. The ghost of Amun Ra would walk down this tunnel at night wearing a loincloth and a dazzling headpiece. She'd frighten passengers and crew with horrifying, eerie shrieks. People believed it to be the result of being pulled from her burial site and transported many miles to a faraway country.
That sounds
Thanks.
terrifying.
Like
Yeah,
where? What? What?
because she was in Egypt,
Yes.
sleeping, living her afterlife. Live in her afterlife. That sounds wrong. Um,
Unliving her afterlife?
eh, living her best undead life, and
Resting.
she was resting. And then some men pulled her out of the ground and decided, let's put her on display.
And then just real quick, this is just the mummy board. There was no actual body with it. There's no mummy with it that ever
But the
traveled
mummy
around.
was also missing.
Yes, the mummy is missing and we don't know why.
So we don't even know where her body is. This is just
Yes.
part of her.
Yes.
This is what's supposed to be a visual representation of her in life. Anyways, thanks to the opening of Holborn Station less than 100 meters away, British Museum Station became less and less frequented. It was announced that British Museum Station would close in 1933, and shortly before it shut down, and two 2 British newspapers offered a cash reward to anyone brave enough to spend a night alone there. Nobody took up the challenge.
Me neither.
I don't know. Part of me is like, I'd be tempted, but at the same time, I'm like, no, thank you.
Maybe not back then, because there would be no way to record your evidence.
Yeah, you can't prove it.
So they probably could have just said they saw it and claimed the money.
Mm-hmm.
You're starting to sound like this is something you would have done.
I mean, you're saying you wouldn't want evidence of that? Because I kind of want evidence of that.
Yeah,
I just want to know how much money is involved. It's a real question. All right, go on.
Some claim the legends of the haunting of the British Museum station were sparked by a film, a comedy thriller called Bulldog Jack. In the movie, a secret tunnel leads from a London underground station to the British Museum, where it emerges from an Egyptian sarcophagus. But as the film didn't premiere until 1935, and the British Museum station closed in 1933. The legend is more likely to have influenced the film than the other way around. Bulldog Jack, on the other hand, helped keep Amun-Ra's story alive and known, especially since the film itself would contribute to the Unlucky Mummy's fame in an unusual way. On the night Bulldog Jack was launched, it was rumored 2 women went missing while walking through Holborn Station tunnels. Screams and moans were heard as they vanished, and scratch marks appeared on the walls. The headdress-wearing priestess was seen several times during the next few days. Even today, some claim that if you stand on the Holborn platform, you may hear shrieks and wails echoing from the rails of the British Museum station. Amun-Ra remains one of the most well-known of the London Underground. There's many ghosts, which London Underground Station is said to be home to multiple ghosts and paranormal activity. Also, that's scary too. Women disappearing and screaming and stuff is heard, but they're like, it's a ghost.
Right?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if that was a ghost since it's an underground metro station. Anything can happen there.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like there's just ignoring people that need help
because they think it's a ghost
at some point.
And then the priestess is seen afterwards. It makes me think of Turbo Granny.
Yeah, it just sounds
Turbo Granny.
I'm not gonna lie, the fact that she's seen after these 2 women go missing, and the whole thing about Turbo Granny is she goes where women's lost, girls and stuff, lost souls and stuff.
Turbo Granny's a reference to Dan Da Dan's anime that came out this season.
She's a yokai, which is a demon.
Who lives in the tunnel of Shino City and has appeared because a lot of women
where do they see Turbo Granny the first time?
In the tunnel.
In a tunnel.
Which is a dark space that is easily away from others, and you could do horrible things to people there.
Yes.
Specifically women. But yeah.
Yes. There are no police records or newspaper accounts of the women going missing or being murdered near Holborn Station at the night Bulldog Jack premiered, and the rumors of their disappearance were likely connected to the hype around the film. However, the claims about British Museum Station being haunted are most likely based on historical myths about the Unlucky Mummy and the media related to them. The biggest claim to fame for the Unlucky Mummy, who has been blamed for a variety of incidents including sickness, injuries, fatalities, abductions, the sinking of large ships, and frightening passengers and staff on the metro. Legend also claims Priestess Amun-Ra sparked the war. Sir Ernest Wallace Budge once muttered, "Never print what I saw in my lifetime, but the mummy case of Princess Amun-Ra caused the war. Apparently, the Unlucky Mummy was brought to the German Kaiser, and the series of misfortune that followed I'm sorry, I'm having a problem a hard time reading this last sentence. Apparently, the unlucky mummy was brought to the German Kaiser, and the series of misfortunes that followed spurred the combustible emperor to start World War One.
Dang,
Man,
I
this
knew
poor
it.
mummy face casket, not casket.
Quite the scapegoat, honestly.
Yeah, like they're just blaming it for everything left and right. Jeez.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but I'm wearing different glasses. It's because my glasses completely broke on me, and then I couldn't find glasses for the longest time. I actually randomly found these when I was vacuuming up crumbs out of a drawer in my desk. I have crumbs in my desk because I hide snacks from my kids.
I didn't even question the crumbs in your desk. I was just so proud of you for vacuuming there.
So I had been going through some boxes looking for these spare glasses and nothing. And I found a hand vacuum, and me with my ADHD, I'm like, okay, let me go vacuum some crumbs. And then I opened up my drawer. This is a drawer I had already checked. And I'm like vacuuming, kind of just sad because I'm blind at this point. And then I noticed something shiny in the far back corner of my thing. And I'm like, glasses. But I'm going to blame the mummy for my other glasses breaking.
Don't you dare. It
It
is
was
not her
clearly the
fault.
fairies. Come on.
I would blame the
That's true.
fae more than the unlucky
Yeah, I
mummy.
would.
But you did recently see a picture of the mummy, so you know.
I did. It was after opening up some slides. So thanks a lot, guys.
You're welcome. We'd like to keep it interesting around here. But yeah, like, but is it ultimately truly a cursed object? I'd say the truth is less dramatic. For starters, Amun Ra is not even a mummy. As mentioned before, it's like just the wooden casket part, like the that represents who this person
Basically,
was.
the lid of the casket.
Yes, like the top half of the wooden casket, if you will. And it's dated from roughly 950 to 900 BC. It formerly protected what was left behind in Egypt, and regarding the knockings, apparitions, injuries, and deaths that were allegedly visited by or experienced by people at the British Museum after acquiring Amun Ra, issued a statement in 1934 claiming that the museum had never had a mummy, coffin, or cover involved in any paranormal incidents.
But other stuff, yes.
We don't really know about the other stuff, right? That's all rumors, and rumors makes you spread. A good story is a good story. But yeah, they try to make it clear that the museum had never sold Amun Ra's coffin lid, that the lid cover had been never sailed on the Titanic, never left the museum since arriving there. Budge admitted that the artifact had not only been moved to the basement, but it was only because of a precaution to protect the lid, as well as other treasures during World War One. As early as 1923, Budge was trying to debunk the myths around the unlucky mummy. In an interview with the New York Times, he confirms that the coffin lid of Amun Ra had been confused with the crockery smashing mummy of the suburban drawing room. And modern experts have examined the lid of the coffin and determined it was high quality, but not of someone who was royal. So, it being the casket of a priestess was likely, but definitely not someone of royal blood. It's possible that people wrongly reached the conclusion due to the mention of King Amenhotep, the first of the casket lid. But despite all these, creepy tales around the Lucky Mummy, it remains a fascinating artifact with a very rich history. The British Museum continues to display the mummy. You can visit it and marvel its ancient beauty, ponder the mysteries, and maybe think back to this episode regarding all those crazy rumors. But yeah,
And the fan
currently
fiction.
when you visit, yeah, and all the fan fiction and future fan fiction. But yeah, currently the museum hands out a pamphlet sharing many of the rumors surrounding the unlucky mummy. And it also states that there is no truth to any of it, that the object has never left the museum until it went on a very temporary exhibit in 1990. So, what do you think now you've heard about the mummy?
I think that all the fan fiction propelled this story way But I do believe there is some kind of curse when you do disturb some of these graves, which I don't know if you guys know this, but there is a woman who is her life goal right now is to find Cleopatra's grave. And people have mixed feelings about it because obviously if they do find it, they're going to disturb its resting place and open it, and who knows what kind of curse that could potentially lead to, or just the fact that these people didn't want to be found, so that's why they buried themselves so deep and in a labyrinth places.
Hmm. I just think in this day and age, like I get um, with archaeology, maybe discovering these places, investigating the places, but leave stuff alone if you can. Like it at this point, we all know like we shouldn't be messing with people's fucking bodies in death. I mean, if it was me, and then in the future somebody, I mean, I want to be cremated. I want to be turned into a tree. So
Oh yeah, tree pod all the way.
yes. Um, uh, it's we know better as a society that this is not something we should be doing. It's not like the 1800s where they were like, look at this shit and let's eat them and let's put them in our house and have unboxing parties. And
I hope that we are past eating dead remains that we don't know where they came from or how they got there. I understand that people are curious about the unknown and wanting to explore and learn about other cultures. I also understand that this is 2024 and we have amazing technology that can, see through and like do like
Mhm.
seismographics information. So I'm sure that there's other ways to acquire information without necessarily having to open a crypt. And that's kind of where my stance on that is. But obviously, the ones that are already in museums, I'm going to go look because it's already there and it is interesting. And I am curious about how they got here and the stories that are told around it.
Yeah, that's how I feel when I go to museums like that. It's looking at the stuff, going, this is so interesting and that, but always keeping in the back of your mind about how did this get here? Why is it here? And honor the people who it's been stolen from, their bodies on display, like all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Showing respect.
I agree. But I think even to this day, every time they find something, they definitely open it.
I know they do.
And the curse comes out.
The
The
curse.
curse! And
Curse.
then run into a wall.
What do you think about the rumor of Cleopatra herself saying, obviously it's a rumor because nobody knows exactly who Cleopatra was, which is why everyone is so desperate to find her burial grounds to see.
Hmm.
But she rumored to have said, "No man shall ever find my burial site," which is why a woman is the closest to finding it.
I have heard that saying, but I don't know where it came from.
Yes, so
I like to
this,
believe it. Girl
yeah.
boss all the way.
Well, the archaeologist that's looking, her name is Kathleen Martinez, and she's discovered quite a few mummies already. And she says that she's not going to stop until she finds Cleopatra, which she believes is in an underwater pathway. So they will literally
Hmm.
have to explore underwater for the burial
Okay.
site.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Sounds like an
I,
interesting movie plot.
Right? The
yeah, it could
Mummy
be.
Resurgent, but with like a female lead.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how well that would do, but I think I would watch it if it was as good as The Mummy from 1999.
Oh, I want to watch the movie now.
Hmm.
I know, I always want to watch the movie. Only one and two, though, not the other ones.
Yeah.
For me, only one and two exist. The other ones.
Even then, I prefer the first one, and then I'll watch the second one. The first one's where it's at.
The first one's
I
the
feel
best
like
one.
I feel like the second one has all the same characters though, at least. While the third one just like they only kept a few and they're like, this is the mummy still. And you're like, no, it's not. You guys should have like called it something else because it definitely was not the same.
Once again, thank you, Roz and John Hubbard, for casting that beautiful, beautiful crew of the mummy. I mean, it was just perfection. Anyways, any other thoughts before we end this?
Just a final thank you to Felicia for bringing up going into cursed objects because we had mentioned it. It was brought up in a message and then we completely forgot about it. So thank you for
And
letting
now
us
we've gotten to it.
full circle moment. Thank you.
We're gonna post a second poll for our next topic. I know we ended up being head to head with witches and vampires. So I'm pretty sure by the time this comes out, we'll have
an
already
answer.
figured it out. Yep.
And if not, I suggested we have the cat decide. We'll see how
I
that
tried to
goes.
get my cats to look at it, but they looked at me like I was insane. So
You gotta add the catnip and not tell the audience. Shh.
I just imagine they pick something and I pick up the paper off the ground and there's just a big old pile of catnip underneath. I feel like that was so random.
I mean, you do catnip, you little fish, you know, like give them some options.
Bree, maybe your cats will cooperate.
Maybe. But as cursed objects go, I feel like this one, to me, comparing them to other cursed objects, seems more like it was rumor based.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to cover cursed objects that are currently on display right now that have to be protected, which a lot of us know some of them because they became famous from watching the Conjuring series and Ghost Adventures, with Zach Bagans being the owner of one of the biggest occult museums now.
Oh, should we have a field trip at his museum?
You have to sign a waiver. I've heard you have to sign a waiver, and there's a lot of reviews on this museum where something does happen.
Yeah, one of my mom's coworkers, she went there with her daughter, and she and her daughter had to leave because her daughter became overcome while in there.
Well, one of my old coworkers went with her mother and her boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And when they got back to their hotel room, the mom noticed when she was changing that she had scratches on her body.
No.
Yes, and they were in places that, you know, obviously your arms, that could have been someone like scared, but they were on her back and on her chest.
That's gonna be a hard no for me. Thank you.
You don't want to bring something home.
I'm like morbidly like curious, but at the same time, I like after we went to what was it, the Davis Horton house, and just that whole thing where like they open the gate and you just cross that threshold, and it just immediately felt like you like.
Yeah,
immediately I felt
immediate
awful.
stale air was weird.
Yes.
I was not expecting that. In fact, I was expecting nothing. I was like, cool, this is a house.
No, it suddenly felt like I was being like gravity became extra strong in that area. Like everything, I felt like I weighed like 1,000,000 pounds.
Like the sensation from the Montezuma house where my brain like knew things before they said it without context. That was also not
I know that
for
whole
that
thing
time.
where like you grabbed my hand and I was like, okay, we're holding hands. And then you're like, my hands feel tingly. and then they talked about how I was a piano player
here.
Yep.
as they talk about how this person passed away by playing the piano. So anyway.
I know he had died at playing piano. That's insane.
Yeah, I always wondered how places feel like those places. Obviously, some bad stuff has happened there, but I wonder how it compares to places where a lot of bad stuff, like Alcatraz. Like, are those two places even comparable?
I want to go to Alcatraz.
Because
I've
that's a
only been
lot
on
of
the
lost
boat
souls.
around it, but yeah, like
I,
that's. Listen, I'm gonna hand you my camera. I'm gonna wish you the best, and I'm gonna find out through you.
no, come with us. We'll do the nighttime tour.
Oh, the nighttime tour.
Yeah. I've heard stories where people they're told to go into this room, I think where they used to do solitary confinement, and they close the door and they're like it's like they can hear stuff and then it's really fucking weird. Like part of me wants to try it, but also then I'm like, no. I don't
Speaking
want
of
to take
hearing
stuff off.
stuff, speaking of hearing stuff, there is an app that you can download on your phone that's similar to the little machines they give you when they do ghost hunting.
Hmm.
Um, would you download it?
Yeah, that came upon my TikTok the other day. It was somebody saying, I don't have any friends, so let me talk to the ghosts in my house. So she just sits there all day or like doing something, and words just say, like, come up, and she just responds to them all day. And I'm
Okay,
like,
that's
is,
unsettling.
yeah, I'm like, is that real, or is that the app just. Because some of them are very, like, observant of what she's saying. So it makes me think, like, maybe there's some truth, but I don't know. TikTok, not very known for truthful things.
I just imagine it's AI of some sort on a timer.
That seems more
Oh yeah.
factual. I, AI is definitely where it's smart enough to do that right now.
Yeah. That's why I don't trust the apps, but I would like the like actual machines.
The
I'd be curious
EKGs.
about it.
All right, well, let's end this episode before we start going on and on about ghost hunting when
Ghost
this.
hunting.
I think we want to go on a ghost hunt.
No, no, no. I want to tell you about a place, and you can tell me about it when you get back.
Okay.
But yes, let's end this episode. Thank you again to Felicia. Thank you to the ladies for doing wonderful research on this fabulous topic. And we'll see you next time on Geeky Ghouls.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, hello, can you hear me?
Thanks for listening to our podcast.
For more ghoulish fun, connect with us on social media, Geeky Ghouls or Geeky Ghouls Podcast.
Want more Geeky Ghouls? Visit our Substack for behind the scenes content, episode recaps, teasers, movie reviews, and more.
We'd love to hear your suggestions for future episodes. Share your fan art and overall comments about this week's topic.
You can also join our Geeky Coven on Patreon and unlock exclusive content and perks. Your support means the world to us.
Catch us on the next episode of Geeky Ghouls.